Representation is important everywhere, but it is essential in spaces where lives are on the line. This sentiment resonates strongly among many Black residents, and particularly with the Virginia Beach Police Department. Here is an exploration of the high price of choosing blue when you're Black.
Well, to begin with, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and being born and raised in Brooklyn, policemen were always my friend.
This is John Bell Jr.
I lived in a community where in East New York, Brownsville, and my father was the vice president of our block association, and we always had the policemen from the 75th Precinct coming by to have meetings in our basement. So I was used to seeing policemen there, and my lifelong dream was always to be a policeman.
He's not lying. Here's a note John wrote when he was in the 7th grade.
When I grow up, I wish to be a detective. This would be me showing that I'm a good citizen because of the risk that I would be taking. It would also show that I care for the safety of citizens in the community that I will be stationed. Being a detective will be a job that calls for a high school diploma, but if I go to college, I'll be in a better position to get the promotion right away. This job pays well enough to support a nice-sized family, plus extra money for recreational activities and bills.
John realized his dream and joined the New York Transit Police Department in 1973. There, he worked among a multiracial police force.
But I remember when I was married in 75, and I remember being in the Poconos on my honeymoon. And I remember getting a call from one of my sergeants, Sergeant Hill. And he's like, "Bell, what's going on?" I said, "Sergeant, I'm up on my honeymoon, I'm Poconos, just having a good time." He said, "Well, listen, not to break bad news to you, but you've been laid off, so don't take any police action." I'm like, "Excuse me? Okay, enjoy your honeymoon." "Thank you, Sarge." So I left to go on my honeymoon with a job. I came back, unemployed. They were hiring policemen in Virginia Beach, so I applied and ended up in Virginia Beach in 1976. The police department, when I joined, it was approximately 300 officers, and there were about 8 Black officers in the police department. There was one Black sergeant, that was it, as far as supervisors looked like me. There was a Sergeant Sparrow who had left before I came on the police department, so I'd heard about him but didn't know him.
If you want to know more about the integration of the Virginia Beach Police Department, check out the book by Edna Hendricks Hawkins, linked in our show notes. Back to John Bell.
But that was pretty much it. 300 officers, only 8 of us. It was terrible. Everything that's happened has been a lesson, I guess, in realizing how difficult it was in Virginia Beach and how people didn't really think about, the problems that they're creating and how important it was to have the department reflect the community, more diversity. And I remember as a sergeant at the precinct, we would have snowstorms, and during the snowstorms, we would basically tell our officers, hunker down, find yourself a fire station just to stay there until it eases up. And I remember a lot of people don't think about the things they say and they do and the impact it has and how hurtful it could be. And I remember being in the precinct myself while my officers were out there in the street at fire stations and getting a call. And one of my officers had been involved in an accident, run into the back of a city bus and lost the front bumper to her car. And I remember getting a call at the precinct from a gentleman who said he was driving in the street when he came across the accident and there was a bumper in the street. He says, "Well, I've got the bumper here in my car outside." I'm like, "Okay." And he says, "Yeah, well, I came across, I saw the bumper." And he said, "But I sent and used the N-word, I sent my N to get the bumper out the street and I put it in my pickup truck and I've got it in my car." And I'm like, "You did what?" And he repeated it. "Yeah, I sent my N out to get the bumper out the street and put it in my car. I've got it here if you want it." And I had all my officers in place so they wouldn't drive. And I said, "Well, don't worry about it. I'm going to come by and pick up our bumper. Thank you very much. I appreciate that." I remember leaving the precinct in the snowstorm and going by his house and knocking on his door. And he came through the door and I told him, I said, "I'm Sergeant Bell. We were just talking on the phone and you told me you had our bumper that you had someone pick up out of the street. Just came by to get it." And you just tell the shock on his face, to see an African-American sergeant come by his house to pick up the bumper after he made that statement. So again, if nothing else, I felt that was just an opportunity to educate him on how his words could be hateful. And hopefully it sent a message. But it was things like that that happened that, just made me realize again that I wasn't in Kansas anymore. And coming from Brooklyn, New York, where I basically came up with different groups, minority groups, ethnic groups, to come in Virginia and have to deal with that. But it was difficult. Even the neighborhoods. Burton Station is a community in Virginia Beach, and it's an African-American community, one of the first areas I worked in. And, going through the neighborhood, I would stop and talk to the kids playing basketball, and I would stop playing basketball with them. But then I realized that this is Virginia Beach, a very affluent city, but yet the streets, they're not paved. When it's raining, you can't go through because the streets are flooded. People had outdoor plumbing. They had wells outside. And I'm saying to myself, the disparity as far as seeing how the affluent neighborhoods in Virginia Beach were, but yet you look at Burton Station, you look at Beechwood, some of the other neighborhoods, how the way they just basically neglected them. It helps you realize why people may have that distrust of government, to realize that, they're paying their taxes as well, but yet when it comes to getting services, they're just basically being neglected. So maybe a little more sensitive, and it should have made other police officers as sensitive as well to when you come into those communities, while there might be some resentment, because you represent city government, and you represent the people who are basically leaving their community neglected.
As soon as he could, John took his awareness and vigilance up the chain.
So I worked in the Detective Bureau for a while, and after that, I basically moved on, went to Internal Affairs later on. And that gave me an opportunity because, again, Internal Affairs is where people who have complaints against the police department, they're able to lodge those complaints. So it gave me an opportunity to make sure that folks who came in there and felt they were wrong were treated fairly. Some of the, how can I put that? Some of the officers you may have socialized with, they may be some of the same officers you're called to do an investigation on. And it can be difficult because there are officers that during the course of investigations, you find that they've done wrong, and some may be reprimanded, they may be suspended, some may be fired, and others might be charged criminally for things that they've done. So it's difficult, but it's an important position, and again, it's a way to instill that trust in the community of the police department. Much later on, 89, I don't know if you're familiar with the Greek Fest in Virginia Beach, and that's when we basically had a disturbance. It was basically a mini riot, where during the summer, you'd have black college students come to Virginia Beach, to the ocean front.
Greek Fest was a celebration for sororities and fraternities of historically black colleges and universities that happened over Labor Day weekend. It started in the early 1980s as a picnic at Croatan Beach for black sorority and fraternity members. Then the event grew. In 1986, a promoter got involved, named it Greek Fest, and moved the party to the ocean front. That's all according to the Virginian Pilot. From there, it gained popularity, and as it did so, it also gained resentment from the city of Virginia Beach, who eventually refused to rent facilities to the organizers of Greek Fest, citing widespread looting. In 1989, in response, the attendees went to the ocean front anyway, where they were met with harsh treatment from the police and National Guard.
And Virginia Beach at that particular time, I'll say some of the merchants, they would probably have preferred if the African-American college students who were coming to Virginia Beach came and, left the money on the table and went home. They weren't necessarily interested in them staying and having a good time. The city at this particular time, they didn't do anything as far as planning for activities because I think they felt that might be encouraging the students to come. So you came, you walked up and down Atlantic Avenue, and that was pretty much it, drove your cars back and forth. And we had a mini riot at the ocean front, and there's question about who may have started it, whether it was the college students or it was locals. From being down there, I think it was a combination. Probably people took advantage of an unfortunate situation to loot, and we had the riots at the ocean front.
Many people, even today, avoid the topic of Greek Fest. As both a black man and a police officer, John's insights were particularly helpful in how both communities could heal. Following the riots, John was placed on a task force to try and better understand how the city and the police force could better respond the following year. After observing how other cities navigated big events, his group trained officers in Virginia Beach to be more culturally aware. They got input from Norfolk State students, and they began to place police chaplains at the oceanfront. But the damage had been done. The lasting impression of the National Guard and over-policing of college students would take 30 years to begin to fade.
People are going to come, and if you basically send out the message that, you're not wanted, especially with young people, we're going to say, I've got a right to be here and I'm going to come. So it's a question, do they come and you provide something for them to do, show that they're welcome, or do you basically just shut down and close your doors? And I think we've changed the dynamics now. We're looking for Pharrell Williams, what he's done with something in the water. Even with that, Virginia Beach, they opened up, they did plan activities. You look at how successful it was, for everyone. For the merchants, they were happy, they were making money as well. But you have to know history, and that's part of the history of Virginia Beach. And it may not be attractive, but that's the way it was, and we changed the way we interacted with our communities during that time. We benefited from it. So it's very important to know the history. I think that there's about 10% African American on the department. And in 2010, I was appointed as deputy chief. And the division I had included professional development training. So it gave us an opportunity to try to recruit more African Americans. So that was satisfying. So I think they've done a good job at that. I still don't think they're at the place they need to be. While you have an African American lieutenant in the police department, I believe 2 now, you don't have anyone above that rank. So that's a challenge. It was disappointing that, years later, there was a gentleman who retired as a lieutenant, Ronnie Haynes. He's on the police department. And Ronnie and I had said that before we left, we wanted to be able to have officers, black officers in our positions, not to leave those gaps. And Ronnie stayed as long as he could, but unfortunately, we just couldn't get those numbers to where we'd like them to be. And January, 2016 is when I retired from the police department after 40 years.
John could have realized he wasn't in Kansas anymore and headed back up north. But that is not his story. He poured into this community, forging a path for safer policing. At the time of this recording in fall of 2023, something in the water is back in Virginia Beach. It's easy to assume that all is well, but the integration of the Virginia Beach Police Department is still a work in progress. Visit our website, truthbetoldcommunity.com, to find out ways to get involved and share this episode with friends. This series was written by Jackie Glass and Hannah Sobel, edited and hosted by me, Nicole Hill, sound designed by Trindell Lightburn, and our work has been supported by the Virginia African American Cultural Center through a grant from Virginia Tourism Corporation. Follow our work by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. We couldn't do this without people brave enough to share their experiences. So thank you, Deputy Chief John Bell.